Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining us. In this essay I'd like to talk about the difference between accountable government and non-accountable government. So let's look at, say, the Soviet Union or any communist society. The communist government is responsible to the ideology of communism. That's their primary responsibility. Whereas in capitalist or democratic capitalist societies, the government is responsible to the people. And there are various checks and balances that are in place. It can be the courts, it can be media scrutiny, being embarrassed or humiliated if they do stupid and dumb things. It can be various institutions that will criticise them and have a voice through the media. So these are the checks and balances on governments that represent the people. Now, if we look at the differences here in communist countries, the pursuit of ideology means they'll pursue an ideological outcome and they'll accept pretty much any collateral damage in pursuit of that outcome. If that means famine or deaths or anything, then fine. And because they control the media and all the organs of state, they'll blame the people. So if the Soviet government would could do something where the crops failed or some misguided policy that would fuck things up generally, what they would do would be to blame the people. They'd say, well, it was the counter-revolutionaries that did it. It was the bourgeois, people with bourgeois thoughts that did it. It was the enemies of the people that did it. It wasn't us. We pursued the ideology. We were doing the right thing. It's these people in our midst. They fucked it up. It's their fault, not the government's. And we're going to root those people out and make them pay. Now we can see sort of a lot of those sort of things happening in the West at the moment. The reason that lazy black people aren't rich is it's white supremacists. I mean, what else could it be? It's Nazis. That's what it is. Or if the government's imposing, for example, medical lockdowns that are ruining the economy, well, it's not us. We didn't do it. It's those people that didn't get vaccinated, or it's those people that didn't stay in their houses when we told them. They're the ones. They did it. It's their fault. And we're going to get them. We're going to stick it up them. So this is the difference between a government that focuses on ideology or one that focuses on, again, representing the people. Now, when the switch to globalisation sort of occurred, and it was happening very gradually, say from the early 1970s onwards, but it picked up pace after the communist bloc fell over in the early 1990s. So gradually, in fact quite quickly really, ideology, as in the globalist ideology, has replaced this idea of being governments representing the people. Now, governments that represent the people don't fuck up a whole lot. They make mistakes, but they have to correct it. They've got to do something to compensate for it. They have to accept their mistakes. They have to publicly accept the humiliation, the shame that goes with it, because there are so many areas of scrutiny. There's an opposition political party that's saying, well, hey, look, those guys screwed up. We would do it differently, and we'll fix the problem if we get into government. And they'll be held accountable by the media and by various institutions of state. Similarly, if the government tries to do something like, for example, overdo a medical lockdown or pretend that there's some sort of climate emergency at hand, there's various courts that can stop them in a representative democracy. So there's all sorts of checks and balances that'll either stop their bad behaviour or will punish them if there is bad behaviour. And bad behaviour can range from ineptitude, incompetence, major errors, or pursuit of momentary pursuit of an ideology that didn't work out, or something like that. But that accountability is there. But with the globalisation of the Western world, where the globalists own all the governments, they own all the major political parties, they own all the institutions, the universities, they own the entire, 95% of the media landscape, they own all the major social media platforms. So because of that accountability that used to exist, it doesn't exist anymore. Now, if we compare communist countries, where again the focus is on the ideology or simply the aggrandizement of a small elite, or both mixed in, when we look at them, they constantly have things like famines. They constantly pursue objectives that really hurt the people and make the people suffer, and they constantly blame the people for their own mistakes. So the government makes these terrible mistakes, one after the other, and then they blame the people, that they're enemies in the midst and it's all their fault. So they never accept the responsibility, and there are no organs of state or any checks and balances to hold them accountable. And after a while they forget about the accountability. The only thing that's in their mind is the ideology they're pursuing. Now in the West, we always had, or have had for a long time, a situation where governments were accountable through the media and through various institutions, opposition political parties. All those checks and balances have gone, all of them. Sure, they argue about how many transgender bathrooms there should be in a school or something, but basically all the checks and balances are gone. And we can see by the policies that are being pursued in the West at the moment, particularly in regard to medical emergencies and alleged climate emergencies, that they're pursuing ideology, and the collateral damage, they don't care. Nothing is going to hold them accountable for this. The collateral damage is someone else's problem. If there is collateral, and well, as there is collateral damage, there certainly is, then they'll simply be blaming, climate deniers did it, or vaccine hesitancy, and then the climate denier will then be a fascist, which will then be a Nazi. Then there'll all be Hitlers running around, and so that'll be the propaganda that they use, which is exactly how they used to do it in all the communist countries, and still do it today. For example, if the North Korean government screws up, and boy do they screw up there, they'll blame the counter-revolutionaries, enemies of the people. All that sort of silly nonsense goes on, and that's simply because they're not accountable. Now, if we in the West want to return to a situation where these ridiculous ideological objectives are not forced upon us, and reducing our standard of living and increasing our cost of living, then we need to return to a situation of accountability, and we've got some work to do on that score. So let's look in the comments below and see what we can do to return this accountability to Western governments, because they're now off on their globalist ideological crusade, and they're going to force anything on us they want, blame us for it when it doesn't work, and of course it'll be all to our cost in the West. So that's my take on it. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.